There were two events this week which, how different they might appear to be, have something in common. The one is Brexit, and the other one is the decision by the Senate not to call for witnesses in the impeachment trial against President Trump. Now, why can I say that these two events will have something in common? Well, I think it will become clear in a moment what I am getting at, because, as you know, Friday, midnight according to our time, 11 o'clock in the night according to British time, Brexit became a reality. The UK is gone, never to return to the EU. And there were celebrations worldwide by British people. Somebody sent us a firework, or a picture of a firework, I should say, from Germany. So they were celebrating there. They were celebrating all over because now they have obtained their independence. Now, I have already several articles which are going to be published in the next update. One article has to do with the question whether Britain really looks towards a glorious future. And depending on what paper you read right-wing conservative papers, anti-EU, and of course they celebrate it, they talk about the Day of Independence. Then you read other papers, especially European ones, they talk about Little Britain drifting into insignificance. But all seem to agree that the future is far from certain. And the question is, was it an epic opportunity? Was it a grave mistake? We know what is in store. Now, we are not taking sides as whether it was the right decision, the wrong decision, because we know that the Bible has prophesied that there has to be a Brexit. I will explain to you in a moment as to why that is. It was inevitable, as we point out in the Standing Watch program. Nothing anybody could have done would have stopped it. And the battle between the EU and Britain is already beginning. Just this morning, The Guardian published an article saying, but now they are talking about who actually is going to own Gibraltar. See, now Spain is coming back saying, oh, we want it. Up until now, Britain had it based on the agreement within the EU. But now they are no longer within the EU. And we have said for years, for decades, that ultimately Gibraltar will no longer be a part of the United Kingdom. It will probably go to Spain and the EU. So the battle has already begun. It's 1 year of a transition period during which the parties have to hammer out some kind of an agreement. The EU says there's no way that that can be done within a year. Normally it takes many years. It took 7 years to get an agreement going between the EU and Canada. And Boris Johnson said, no way, we are going to stop the transition period by the end of the year, no matter what's going to happen, and whether it's going to be a no-deal divorce ultimately, or whether it's going to be a backbone, or rather a, not backbone, but as some have said, a little kind of an agreement, and without any flesh, just a bone, so to speak, and we don't know yet. We don't know yet, but we know it's going to be ugly. We know it's going to be quite a challenge to get something going. That is on one side. The other one has to do with the Trump situation, and I have to clarify something. I have been talking about the fact that there won't be any impeachment against Trump. Now, that wasn't quite precise. In my mind, what I was talking about is impeachment with the consequence of Trump losing his office, or with him resigning. I said that would never happen. So I should have been more precise here, but the bottom line is Trump is going to be acquitted. As we said from the outset, he's not going to lose his office. And now, based on what has happened, even from a human standpoint, his re-election is guaranteed. I mean, the Democrats have completely committed political suicide. This whole impeachment circus is completely in their disfavor, and now even Democratic and left liberal papers point that out. Now, we have said, too, that Trump is going to be reelected. It's interesting how these things happen. Maybe it was inspired that the Democrats had to start this impeachment circus so that they commit this political suicide, so that there was no doubt that Trump will be reelected. But he's going to be reelected. It's now virtually guaranteed, even from a human standpoint, let alone from the fact that the Bible makes this very clear. And so there will be celebration. There will be celebration next week when, as it is expected, Trump is going to be acquitted, probably on Wednesday, and specifically Trump supporters will celebrate. As the people celebrating Brexit have talked about a great opportunity now. They have been freed from slavery, the slavery of the European Union, and Trump is freeing us from political corruption and Washington. In both cases, that celebration is misplaced if you look at the biblical perspective. Yes, Trump has to be reelected. He has to stay in office for another 4 years. To do what? To bring about what the Bible says needs to be brought about. In other words, ultimately, it's going to be war in both cases. It's going to be a war between the European Union and Great Britain. And it's going to be a war between the European Union and the United States of America. Regardless of whom you want to blame, that's not the point. As God has helped Israel when they came out of Egypt and when they were standing there in front of the Red Sea, as he opened the Red Sea to give Israel a way of escape, and then when the Egyptians tried to do it, they were all killed. With the same assurity and assurance, he will not help Britain when they're going to be attacked by Europe. With the same assurance, he's not going to help America when America is going to be attacked by Europe. Why? Well, the Bible makes this very clear. Because of our many, many sins, individually and collectively. Again, you look at the book of Hosea, and it makes it very clear as to why God is not going to intervene on behalf of our nations. Because we are not willing to learn. We are not willing to accept God's way of life. We are getting more and more into pagan concepts, pagan ideas, ideas which pagans use to worship their gods, which have all been embraced now by a so-called Christianity. And God is very angry about it. Now, this morning I looked at a map, and then I looked a little bit at the history. And I had to reflect on the fact how long it took to get to the point where we are today. And sometimes when it takes so many years, you lose kind of sight, you kind of lose hope. You're saying, well, it takes so long, and therefore there got to be so much which is going to happen still, and so it's going to be many, many more years. But we sometimes don't realize that in God's eyes, 1,000 years is just one day, and he can accelerate events, and he can slow them down. Now, I believe he has slowed down certain events, but I also believe that now we have reached a point where he is accelerating events, so much so that he says, the people will be absolutely surprised when they realize how quick it's going to happen. Anyhow, this map I looked at, right now we have actually 27 member states in Europe. It used to be 28. Now you have take England out. So it's 27 member states. Now we know that's not going to be 27 member states who are ultimately leading Europe. We know it's going to be 10 nations or groups of nations. It's going to be core Europe developing out of these 27 member states. But listen to these figures. England joined the EEC. That was not the EU as we have it today. That was more like a commercial collaboration, EWG in German. EEC on January 1, 1973. I remember at the time when they had applied for membership that we in the church had written articles saying England will never become part of the, in this case, EEC, will never become part of Europe. Well, we were wrong. We were all surprised, frankly, in the church when they did join. And then we said, oh, well, they're going to leave very soon. Well, they had a memorandum and a referendum, actually, shortly thereafter in 1975, but the referendum reconfirmed their being part of the EU. Because we thought, knowing prophecy, that ultimately England could never be part of the European community because we knew a war would break out between the European community and Britain. And we thought at the time, in 1973, we would be much closer to the end. And that's why England would not be part of Europe. They became part of Europe, but then now they left. Way over 40 years they left. 40 years it took until our predictions became true, that England will not ultimately be part of Europe. And that should tell us something. Now they became true. Why? Why now? Why now? Another one, which is very interesting, of course, in 1992, the EU was formed, which was the political and, in a sense, military collaboration, not just economic, and Britain became a member of that one in November of 1993. So again, they became a member only to ultimately leave again. There's another interesting phenomenon which took place when the Berlin Wall was built, separating East and West Germany. It was built in August of 1961. August 13, 1961 to be precise. At that time, Mr. Armstrong made the bold proclamation that the wall will fall again. And nobody believed him. Just nobody outside the church believed him. But the wall fell. But again, it fell in 1991, 30 years later. 30 years went by. It fell completely in November of 1991. The demolition had started in June of 1990. And then German unification was declared on October 3, 1990. 1990. Now it's 2020. Again, 30 years ago. Why do I bring this up now? I bring it up in light of Brexit. I bring it up in light of what is happening here in the United States of America. Why is October 3, 1990 an important date? Why is it an interesting date, apart from the fact that this was the day when German unification was declared? Well, I checked it out this morning. Guess what October 3, 1990 was? It was the opening night of the Feast of Tabernacles. Another interesting occurrence took place in 1988. Franz Josef Strauss, now some of you probably have never heard the name, and some of you have, because Franz Josef Strauss was a very famous German politician who actually knew Mr. Armstrong and Gunnar Ted Armstrong. And we believed for many years that it is possible that Franz Josef Strauss could be the beast. He seemed to have all the qualifications and characteristics for him being the beast. And so we watched him carefully. And then what happened? On October 3, 1988, I remember that I came down, I was in a hotel, I came down to the reception and there was a paper, Franz Josef Strauss died on a heart attack in his airplane. Now, why was October 3, 1988 an important date? It was the last great day of the Feast of Tabernacles, the last great day. It's all coincidental, I don't know. All I'm telling you these things to point out how sometimes things happen in a certain way on certain dates. Now, it wasn't Franz Josef Strauss who was a beast, obviously, he's dead, but somebody's going to arise soon. He's going to arise in this time we are in, where the relationship between Europe and the UK will go downhill. The UK might not even exist any longer pretty soon, because it might be complete total separation. An article today pointed out Scotland might declare independence. Northern and Southern Ireland might, believe it or not, reunite. And of course, then you have Wales. But the relationship will get worse and worse. Brexit was a necessary requirement. It took a long time, and people, I believe also in the church, got quite tired thinking, oh, it's not going to happen. The church was completely wrong in their predictions, and it's all going to happen differently. At the same time, we have a deteriorating relationship between Europe and the United States of America. And that's why I'm saying President Trump has to stay in power, because under no other president I can think of would this deteriorating relationship continue the way it does. And I believe he is also going to be used for some other important fulfillment of prophecy. He will be used in one way or another, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in the sermon, because the third temple has to be built. And it is my strong belief that President Trump, in one way or another, will have something to do with it, as King Cyrus had something to do with it. And then there are other things he has to bring about. He's going to be used to bring them about. This does not reflect on his character one way or the other. It's just a fact that he is a man who was put in place to bring about certain prophetic, biblical events which have to be taken place in order to make it possible that the Great Tribulation starts and that finally Jesus Christ can return. I was surprised to learn that other ministers in other Church of God organizations apparently feel the same in that regard like I do, that President Trump is going to be in power because God put him there, or Satan put him there, whoever you want to mention here, it doesn't matter. He is in power to bring about certain prophetic events. And that in all likelihood, so I was told by one minister, the Great Tribulation will start during his second term. We should think about the days in which we are living and why things are coming together that quickly now. And we should realize that we may have a lot shorter time than we may think. People will fall away. I will talk about that too in a moment. It's prophesied. In large numbers, I would add. They will fall away from the truth. People in the Church of God. We have to make sure that we are not one of those, but that we stand still, hold fast, so that nobody can take our crown.